The Russian Revolution, a period of political and social upheaval that spanned from 1917 to 1923, fundamentally reshaped Russia, transforming it from an autocratic empire ruled by Tsars into the world's first communist state, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR. For centuries, Russia was governed by an absolute monarchy, with the Tsar holding supreme power, underpinned by a rigid social hierarchy and a largely agrarian economy. By the early 20th century, however, the Tsarist regime was facing a multitude of challenges, including widespread poverty, social inequality, political repression, and the devastating effects of World War I. The disastrous Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905 exposed the Tsarist government's incompetence and military weakness, leading to increased social unrest and demands for political reform. The 1905 revolution, sparked by the Bloody Sunday massacre, where peaceful protesters were shot by Tsarist troops, forced Tsar Nicholas to concede some limited political concessions, including the establishment of the Duma, Russia's first parliament. However, Nicholas II remained reluctant to relinquish real power, and the Duma's influence was consistently curtailed through manipulation and dissolution, frustrating liberal reformers and fueling further discontent. The First World War, beginning in 1914, proved to be the ultimate catalyst for the revolution, placing immense strain on Russia's economy, military, and society. Russia suffered catastrophic losses on the Eastern Front, and the war effort was plagued by incompetence, corruption, and shortages of essential supplies, leading to widespread famine and economic collapse. By 1917, the situation in Russia had reached a breaking point, with widespread strikes, mutinies in the army, and growing calls for the Tsar's abdication. The February Revolution, March in the Gregorian calendar, began with demonstrations and strikes in Petrograd, formerly St. Petersburg, in February 1917, triggered by food shortages and war weariness. The army garrison in Petrograd mutinied, refusing to suppress the protests, and the Tsar's government lost control of the capital. Faced with mounting pressure, Tsar Nicholas II abdicated the throne on March 15, 1917, ending over 300 years of Romanov rule. With the Tsar's abdication, a provisional government was formed, composed of liberal and moderate socialist politicians, aiming to establish a democratic republic. However, the provisional government faced numerous challenges, including continuing the unpopular war effort, addressing land reform, and maintaining social order. Alongside the provisional government, the Petrograd Soviet, a council of workers and soldiers' deputies, emerged as a powerful force, challenging the government's authority. The Petrograd Soviet, dominated by socialist factions like the Mensheviks and socialist revolutionaries, advocated for more radical reforms, including an immediate end to the war and land redistribution. The Bolsheviks, a radical socialist faction led by Vladimir Lenin, initially played a relatively minor role in the revolution, but quickly gained influence by advocating for peace, land, and bread, and all power to the Soviets. Lenin, who had been living in exile in Switzerland, returned to Russia in April 1917 with the help of the German government, who hoped to destabilize Russia and force it out of the war. Lenin's April thesis called for an immediate socialist revolution, the overthrow of the provisional government, and the establishment of a dictatorship of the proletariat. The Bolsheviks skillfully exploited the growing discontent among workers, soldiers, and peasants, gaining support through effective propaganda and organization. In July 1917, the Bolsheviks attempted to seize power in an uprising known as the July Days. But the uprising failed, and Lenin was forced to flee into hiding. However, the Kornilov affair in August 1917, a failed attempt by General Lava Kornilov to establish a military dictatorship, weakened the provisional government and strengthened the Bolsheviks' position. The Bolsheviks, under the leadership of Leon Trotsky, organized the Military Revolutionary Committee, a clandestine group that prepared for an armed uprising. On the night of October 25-26, 1917, November 7 to 8 in the Gregorian calendar, the Bolsheviks launched the October Revolution. Sites in key government buildings, communication centers, and transportation hubs in Petrograd. The uprising was relatively bloodless, as the provisional government offered little resistance, and the Bolsheviks quickly gained control of the capital. The Bolsheviks established the Council of People's Commissars, a new government led by Lenin, and issued decrees nationalizing land, banks, and industries. The Bolsheviks also signed a treaty with Germany, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, ending Russia's participation in World War I, but at a significant territorial cost. The October Revolution sparked a brutal civil war between the Bolsheviks, known as the Reds, and their opponents, known as the Whites, who were supported by foreign powers. The Civil War lasted from 1917 to 1922, resulting in millions of deaths from combat, famine, and disease. The Bolsheviks, under the leadership of Trotsky, established the Red Army, a highly disciplined and effective fighting force. The Bolsheviks implemented a policy known as war communism, nationalizing industries, requisitioning grain from peasants, and suppressing opposition. War communism led to widespread famine and economic collapse, causing further discontent among the population. The Whites, composed of former Tsarist officers, landowners, and liberal politicians, lacked a unified leadership and a coherent political program. By 1921, the Bolsheviks had emerged victorious in the Civil War, consolidating their control over Russia. In 1921, Lenin introduced the new economic policy, NEPI, a temporary retreat from war communism, allowing some limited private enterprise and market mechanisms. The NEP helped to revitalize the Russian economy, but it also created new social inequalities. In 1922, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, was established, uniting Russia with other Soviet republics. Lenin edict in 1924, triggering a power struggle between Leon Trotsky and Joseph Stalin. Stalin eventually emerged victorious, consolidating his control over the Communist Party and the Soviet Union. Stalin implemented a policy of collectivization, forcing peasants onto collective farms, leading to widespread famine and resistance. Stalin also launched the Great Purge, a period of political repression and executions, eliminating his opponents and consolidating his power. The Russian Revolution profoundly impacted the 20th century, inspiring communist movements around the world and shaping the geopolitical landscape. The revolution resulted in the creation of the world's first communist state, the USSR, which played a major role in international affairs for over 70 years.